Hi everybody. It is time for my book review for this month. And I'm showing this book, but it's only the second in a series of 9. And I'm probably late to the game for the Expanse series. I feel that almost everyone else has known about this before I did. I came to it originally through the TV series, which was originally on the Sci-Fi Network and then got picked up by Amazon and is heading into its final season, at least as far as Amazon goes, next season. So they're going to do a season 6, which parallels book 6 of the 9-book series. And I wanted to do this book because I feel maybe my last book reviews have been about nonfiction serious topics, and I wanted to get into something fun. This is classified as space opera, and over the years, people have talked about space opera versus science fiction, and I think I vaguely knew the difference, but before I did this review, I looked into it a little bit more. It turns out space opera is a subgenre of science fiction. So it normally targets scientifically advanced societies, normally spread out across a galaxy or multiple galaxies. So Star Wars is the classic space opera, whereas I don't know why Star Trek would be considered not space opera. Probably has enough hard science fiction, as it is called, for it to be called science fiction, but in certain ways it could be a space opera as well. So I just want to talk about why I really enjoy this series and why you might think about committing to a 9-book series yourself. You can see it's not very large, but it's not very short either. This weighs in at about just under 600 pages. And if you look at the series, they're anywhere between, let's say, 590 and 680. So the books are remarkably similar in length. Why do I like this series? So there's a political drama around 3 different races, you could say, of humans. The first are from Earth. Earth has been hit by changes in the climate and you could say demoralization of the populace. So half of the population of Earth, if not more, is on some kind of basic rationing, covers their food and shelter. But the chances to expand are on Luna, which is the moon, and in other planets. Some of the most disciplined people of Earth went to Mars some centuries before and started a terraforming project. It's still got many, many years to go, but they're a very disciplined, you could say, race of humans, people who have a singular purpose to turn a planet of dust into a garden, is how it's normally phrased. And then there are the people who are in the belt. Now, the belt, out beyond Jupiter and Saturn, there are asteroids and comets that are in motion, which can be captured and then spun and then drilled into. So a lot of these asteroids and comets have minerals that are very valuable and important, but you can't commute from Earth or Mars out to the belt to work, so you have to live out in the belt. And what has happened is people living in low gravity have physically changed. So their bones have become elongated, they're taller. This also means their bones are weaker because they're more fragile. And because they've grown up outside of gravity, their lungs are weaker. And a form of torture for a belt terrorist is to put them in Earth gravity. And they sort of really suffer in this way. Because of the types of, just as the sort of people who went to Mars were a very disciplined sort, a lot of immigrants, such that one of the characters has an Indian face but has a Texas drawl. Throws you off a bit, but these people were said to have colonized Mars. And the people out in the belt have put together their own sort of Belter Creole. And it's got mix of Russian and Chinese and Japanese and English, and it's really quite something. What's happened is the tension between these 3 factions of humanity have been building prior to the start of the first book. And this is not the first book, this is actually the second book. The first book is called Leviathan Wakes. And I read it on Kindle, so I could only just show you my Kindle. to show you the book. So I'm using book 2 as the prop, which, as you can see, I've only just started. This is in my fun read pile. And something comes into the universe that destabilizes the status quo. And the status quo is Mars is an enormous military superpower with stealth technology and weapons such that if they wanted to invade Earth, Earth would be in a world of hurt. Mars might still lose, but it would be very bad for both societies. So there's sort of mutually assured destruction between Mars and Earth, but they have all the, say, money and resources. Even though Mars is a dust bowl, they've earned money to go out and take from parts of the belt. The belt are the exploited class from both Mars and Earth, second-class citizens in many ways, and there's a faction within the belt. Well, there's many factions within the belt, but there is a faction of factions, you could say, called the OPA, the Outer Planets Alliance, and they are sort of you want to call them a Taliban, an Al-Qaeda. If those connotations are negative for you, you could think of the IRA, if those are positive for you. I'm not saying the terrorist organizations are positive. It's not a like for like, but because I think as you get into the story, you start to understand why people resort to the OPA. There's no other hope for them, and so they have to go that way. So you have the status quo world, and then something comes into the solar system that destabilizes that status quo and starts disrupting Martian society, disrupting the way that the belt relates to everyone else. So at a very high level, this is a series about the way humanity grows. In a sense, it's a story of history as well, because if you look at human history, you have rise and fall, you have progression and regression, and this is that same story writ into the future with spaceships. So for those of you who are interested in history, I think you'd really enjoy this, even if you've never necessarily picked up any kind of science fiction. And I think that's what I want to encourage people, is to not be turned off. I run into a lot of people who are turned off by the idea of science fiction, and I just say, just give this a try, see how you like it. There's ultimately a human story here, so that's the second thing I want to talk to. At the top level, there's this historical political conflict, but it's also a very real and raw human story about where people come from, the tribes that formed them, and what happens when you form your own tribes, not just by maturing and growing up and getting married and moving and getting a job, but what happens when your tribes have to intersect with people who are very different from you. In fact, there's a slur for each of these races. So the Martians are called dusters, the Belters are called skinnies, the Earth are called squats. The authors want us to have the idea that this is equivalent to, let's say, the N-word for black people, and that these slurs exist because people want to otherize different races that they're not allied with. So I think that's a wonderful counterbalance to the meta beyond everybody story, that there's this relationship that we have to each other as humans. That's the political historical story. And then there's the very real, in-your-face human interest stories, which I find very compelling. And James S.A. Corey is a pen name for two different people, and they alternate chapters, each of them writing the characters they know it and love most, and then they edit each other to make sure that the voice stays constant. And I have to say, I'm very impressed. The voice sounds very, very constant. For those of you like me who love nerdy space battles, there are nerdy space battles. So that is something to really enjoy. And I think that's something that's very well expressed in a television series as well. The Expanse television series, I think, is exceptionally well shot. Unfortunately, there are, in 5 seasons, I suppose it's something that is good. There are 2 episodes in which there are, let's say, some seconds of immodesty. So I can't unconditionally recommend the series. It's unfortunate that what was not at all included in the book in that sense is somewhat, glamorized for television. But there's so much else that they do very, very well in the television format that doesn't make it a competitor with the book. It makes it a wonderful, you could say, complement to the book. And I think there's a graphic novel as well. So it's a very well crafted series, and I'm only in the second book of the book series, and only, let's say, 5 of 6 seasons in television. And I suppose that's the last thing that I want to wrap up with is the idea of it being 9 books is a wonderful luxury. I think a lot of times when you're younger, you want to get to the next thing sooner. So when you're 9, you want to be 10, and you're talking about being 9.5 and 9 3/4, and you want to finish things. And I think one of the things, knowing that book 9 is to be released in November of 2021, and knowing that the final book people have read way ahead of me there at the end of book 8, there's no way I'm going to read all the books before November. But that I'm just sort of plodding along, and I'm going to get there when I get there, but I'm just luxuriating and enjoying the story. And I've already seen the series, so I know the events that are going to happen in this book, but not precisely, because obviously there's differences between the book and the television series, even though television series has as its producers the authors. So there's a lot of wonderful, I wouldn't call it oversight, but let's say contribution and collaboration. So I recommend taking on the series, and if you like, they have novellas which are anywhere between 30 and 50 pages. So you might just take on one of the novellas and see if you like it. I would start with some of the earlier ones like The Butcher of Anderson Station or The Churn, and see how you feel. It's going to introduce you to the world. It's not a big commitment, and certainly not a big financial commitment. It's probably something around $2 or $3. And even the books are not a big financial commitment, anywhere between $8 and $10. I happened to get this because it was the same price as a Kindle, and I'm a dead tree person when the price is the same. So that's my recommendation for this month. The Expanse series. The first book is Leviathan Wakes. As I said, you could choose a novella, and the novellas are sprinkled throughout the series, so you're not just limited. But I would encourage you to get the early novellas, so you're not reading into something that's later on that you don't get. Leviathan Wakes is the first book. Caliban's War is the second. So enjoy, and if you already read it, or you have some other feedback, or you started reading something and you have some feedback, please feel free to put in the comments below. But otherwise, I hope that you enjoy it. I certainly have enjoyed it enough to record a video telling others to read it.